This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Democratic leaders criticize a compressed schedule for Trump's Senate impeachment trial. We have the latest on the coronavirus outbreak in China. And concerns for anti-terror efforts in West Africa as the U.S. considers pulling out its troops. This is a CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment. But first, Penina Karibe with the day's business headlines. Penina.
Thank you, Beatrice. Coming up on Africa Live Business tonight. South African Airways cancels flights as cash crisis deepens. And Angola now vows to use all means to bring Isabel dos Santos to justice over the loss of $1 billion. I'll be back in a bit with details of those stories and plenty more. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Penina, thank you. And let's start off in the U.S., where the hearings in the U.S. Senate impeachment trial of President Donald Trump are set to begin in just about an hour from now. 100 senators are serving as jurors and will decide whether to remove Trump from office. Trump is accused of abusing power by leaning on Ukraine for personal political favors. The House impeachment managers will deliver their case in 2 marathon 12-hour sessions that could stretch into the middle of the night. Trump's legal team will then have equal time to respond. The U.S. president has rejected the impeachment charges and wants the trial to be over before he heads to Capitol Hill for his State of the Union address on February the 4th. For more on this developing story, I'm joined by Jim Spellman. He's joining me from Washington. Jim, thank you for joining us on the program. We see there are already issues raised about a compressed schedule. What else can we expect as the Senate trial begins?
Yeah, so the proposal that the Senate will start with today from the Republicans is, as you mentioned, 24 hours of testimony for each side, spread over just 2 days each, and not starting until after midday. So this could go quite late into the night. So we're already hearing criticisms that this means it'll be too difficult for the American public to be able to watch all this. These could go late into the night. Another big question mark here is whether or not the Senate will hear from new witnesses and hear new testimony. But the way it's laid out now, they won't even decide that until after all the arguments have been made. The Democrats say they do want to hear from more witnesses and have more information put into it. So that's something that will come up today. But at this point, we believe that the Republicans have the votes they need to pass this set of rules that they put forward without any major changes. Back to you, Beatrice.
But it is not without controversy, though, because there's been some ethical concerns regarding Trump's lawyer. Can you give us more details on that?
Sure. One of the lead attorneys for President Trump, Pat Cipollone, he's also the White House counsel. Democrats say they consider him a fact witness, and they want to know everything he knows about what happened in the White House surrounding these alleged attempts by President Trump to push the president of Ukraine to launch investigations into Trump's political rivals. The Democrats at this point, though, are stopping short of pushing for Cipollone to be recused, but that's another issue that has come up here today at the U.S. Senate in the Capitol. Beatrice?
Well, Jim, can you tell us more, though, about the guidelines you mentioned for the trial and what the possible outcomes might be?
So what's unusual is this will look very different than a typical day in the U.S. Senate. We won't be hearing from the actual senators. We'll be hearing from the so-called impeachment managers, Democrats from the House that will, to some degree, act like prosecutors, and then we'll hear from President Trump's defense team as well. So it'll definitely have a different feel here when this gets going. I think that we'll have to all take a day or two to get used to how this looks and feels, and to not hear these senators commenting on the floor of the Senate. Beatrice?
Well, Jim, the president wants the trial to be over before he heads to Capitol Hill for the State of the Union address in February. And since the president's party controls the Senate, any likelihood of surprises for President Trump?
So it doesn't appear at this point that there's much chance that President Trump will be convicted. They would have to flip about 20 Republican senators for that to happen. I think the real question will be how much political damage is inflicted along the way to either side. I think that's very difficult to map out, but I think it will essentially be the goal of both sides throughout this is to inflict political damage on the other side. So that's what we'll have to watch over these coming days and weeks. Beatrice?
Right, James Spellman joining us there from Washington. Thank you. Now, Chinese mainland authorities have confirmed 6 deaths and 318 cases from a pneumonia-like virus. The vast majority of these cases, 270 in total, are in the central province of Hubei, where the virus originated, and that number includes 15 medical professionals. Meanwhile, 10 cases have now been confirmed in Beijing and 17 in the southern province of Guangdong. Taiwan has also confirmed its first case. 4 cases have been registered outside the country. Wang Yuan with the latest.
It has suddenly become a much demanded item, with many seeing it as a necessity, the face mask. Whether online or in-store, it seems to be sold out everywhere.
Of course, I'm worried. I just want to buy masks. I tried to buy them around my neighborhood before leaving, but they were all gone. I'm worried because the virus has affected many people. Our TV and Weibo have been flooded with news about this.
Confirmation that the virus can be transmitted among humans hasn't helped to ease worries. 6 people have died of the new coronavirus, all in China. As fear mounts, the Chinese government has vowed to bring the outbreak under control.
Of course, I'm worried about it. I bought this mask yesterday because I know I need to come to the train station. The coronavirus can spread among people by contact, and so I will prepare masks and wash my hands often. I will pay attention to these ways of protection in public areas.
Countries and cities have ramped up their screening at major entry and exit points. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says a meeting will be held on Wednesday among China, the World Health Organization, and other countries affected by the epidemic. Authorities are still investigating the exact origin of the virus.
Attending countries, the WHO and relevant experts will share information and carry out scientific research and judgment over the epidemic during the meeting. China is willing to continue to deepen international cooperation and work with parties to tackle the epidemic and jointly safeguard regional and global health security.
Renowned Chinese respiratory expert Zhong Nanshan expects the number of the cases to rise during the upcoming Chinese New Year holiday, as hundreds of millions in China continue to travel home or abroad. But he also expressed confidence that a similar scenario to the SARS epidemic in 2003, which infected thousands and killed nearly 800 globally, will not be repeated. Wang Yuan, CGTN.
The Pentagon is looking at strategies to reduce the number of U.S. troops in West Africa, including a reported possible option to pull out all units serving there. U.S. forces have been supporting France and the G5 Sahel Joint Force in their fight against extremist militants in recent years. CGTN's Giles Gibson reports from Washington.
500 visual approach calls.
There are more than 5,000 US troops stationed in Africa, but that number could soon change. Pentagon officials are conducting a sweeping review of US military presence all over the world. At a summit with leaders from the Sahel region in France last week, French President Emmanuel Macron called on US forces to stay.
J'espère pouvoir convaincre le président Trump.
I hope to convince President Trump that the fight against terrorism in which he is deeply involved is playing out in this region as well, and that the Libyan issue cannot be separated from the situation in the Sahel and the Lake Chad region.
Libyen n'est pas séparable de la situation au Sahel et dans la région du lac Tchad.
US military presence in West Africa came under scrutiny in 2017 when 4 US troops were killed in Niger. At the time, Republican and Democrat senators called for the American presence in the country to be reviewed.
This is the CNN Democratic presidential debate.
And in a recent Democratic debate among those hoping to challenge Donald Trump for the presidency in November, candidate Pete Buttigieg said some members of Congress hadn't even known US troops were in Niger. The Pentagon's strategy developed under the Trump administration prioritizes countering Russia and China. But some military analysts say other threats, like extremist militants in the Sahel, shouldn't be forgotten.
The kinds of numbers that are deployed there are minuscule compared to the numbers we have in the Middle East, Europe, or East Asia. And so I don't think it's really productive for us to think about either or, pulling out of some Africa deployments in order to reinforce other deployments.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, says a decision on troop numbers in West Africa could come within the next 4 to 8 weeks. Giles Gibson, CGTN, Washington.
Turkey says it will continue to support Somalia despite losing engineers in Al-Shabaab attacks near Mogadishu. Meanwhile, Somalia says it will increase protection for Turkish engineers as they continue to renovate key roads linking the capital and surrounding regions. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo has more.
A military air ambulance evacuated Saturday's blast victims to Turkey. It's the second evacuation in less than a month, with Al-Shabaab vowing more attacks against Turkish interests and its nationals stationed in Somalia. The latest attack happened on Saturday along this road that links the seaside capital of Mogadishu and Afgoye, an agricultural town some 30 kilometers southwest of the capital.
We are airlifting 9 people today, 3 Turkish and 6 Somali nationals. They were stabilized in Mogadishu, and therefore it took 2 days before we requested the evacuation. We condemned this and other previous attacks, but we remain committed to assisting Somalia to attain stability.
Last month, close to 100 people, among them 2 Turkish engineers, were killed on the same road. The militant group used a truck bomb to carry out the attack that is the 3rd deadliest to rock the Horn of African nation that is struggling to contain a decades-long insurgency. Somali officials say that such attacks will not affect the positive relations between Ankara and Mogadishu.
We're very grateful to Turkey for airlifting our injured victims. This is the second medical evacuation in less than a month. The renovation project will continue, and the attacks by the terrorists will not damage ties between Somalia and Turkey. We wish the injured a speedy recovery.
On Tuesday, Somali Prime Minister met with the Turkish and Qatari ambassadors as well as security chiefs in a move aimed at assuring security to Turkish contractors. The state of Qatar is funding the infrastructure project at a cost of $200 million. The contract was awarded to a Turkish company, and it involves renovating a 120-kilometer stretch of road linking Mogadishu, Afgoye and Johar. Militant group Al-Shabaab says that it will continue to target Turkish interests in Mogadishu. The group says that Ankara's involvement in the training and equipping of Somali security forces was a, quote, careless mistake. This is Ankara's military training academy, the biggest in the world, that trains commanders and special forces critical to countering Al-Shabaab's insurgency campaign. For now, more armed personnel have been deployed along the stretch of road to thwart potential attacks, with construction set to resume following recent attacks. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The African Union has named the conflict in Libya as its most urgent priority this year. Arrangements are underway for its 33rd summit for heads of state and government. Ambassadors from the continent met on Tuesday at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to begin setting the agenda. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports.
Reflecting on the year gone by, the outgoing chair of the African Union named a number of achievements. They included launching of the African Continental Free Trade Area and offering assistance to conflict-affected countries like Sudan and South Sudan. But the Egyptian ambassador to the continental body also highlighted some gaps.
Egypt particularly sensed that the post-conflict reconstruction and development has not been given the required attention, despite its critical importance in preventing relapse into conflict.
Looking to the year ahead, security on the continent was named as a priority for the African Union leadership.
Without peace and security, nothing can be achieved. So it's absolutely important to push forward on the process. Already we've seen signs of difficulties, even in West Africa, in parts of the Congo and Central African Republic, but in our view, the principal problem now is Libya.
The Commission has criticized external interference in Libya's political situation in the past 11 months. The UN-backed government of National Accord is fighting the rebel Libyan National Army that wants to take over the capital, Tripoli.
We need to secure peace and security in Libya because it affects migration, it affects the movement of arms down, it affects the stability of Niger, Mali, even Burkina Faso. And just trying to maintain some peace is so expensive. It takes money away from trying to provide for the socio-economic development of the continent.
These issues will be at the forefront of the upcoming summit. The theme for the African Union in 2020 is silencing the guns, creating conducive environment for Africa's development. The target is to find lasting solutions to the conflicts on the continent that continue to worsen the humanitarian situation. South Africa will take over from Egypt as the chair of the African Union this year. The country will be leading efforts to make the continent a more stable place in 2020. Conjoined, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Nigeria's formerly conjoined twins now recovering at home after a successful separation. And Norway pledges to take 600 refugees from camps in Rwanda.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Nigeria now, and the country is applying for an $890 million grant from an international finance organization, the Global Fund, to reduce the burden of HIV, tuberculosis and malaria. The fund is meant to be spread between the years 2021 to 2023. However, experts say more needs to be done to utilize these funds in reducing the burden of preventable diseases in the country. Here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza with that report.
According to Dozie Ezechukwu, an executive of Global Fund Nigeria, malaria will take the highest allocation of $417.8 million, followed by HIV with $329.1 million and tuberculosis, TB, $143.5 million. The World Health Organization, WHO, states that Nigeria accounted for 86 million malaria cases globally in 2019, with HIV prevalence rate of 1.4% and second place of list of countries with the highest TB burden on the continent. Although in 2018, Global Funds donated $660 million to tackle HIV, tuberculosis and malaria epidemic in Nigeria, the country is still faced with the high prevalence of these preventable diseases. Experts say for Nigeria to make much progress in reducing the burden of these diseases with donor funds, the government will need to do more to be more transparent and accountable.
There should be an assessment of what has happened to the previous funds for these programs that have been dedicated to Nigeria over the years. That would help them learn what needs to be improved on. Otherwise, this money will come in and a few changes will happen, but it may not drive down the impact that they really set out to achieve.
Nigeria has recorded some progress in the fight against these diseases. According to data from the United Nations, the number of AIDS-related deaths reduced by 26% from 72,000 deaths to 53,000 deaths between 2010 to 2019. However, experts say beyond the impact of donor funds, much more progress can be achieved if individuals and health workers increase their sensitivity and proactiveness to healthcare.
People should learn to seek healthcare early, and then at the health facilities, our health workers can do better with enlightening people on the symptoms of these diseases, how to recognize them in their environment, and quickly seek help. So a lot has to be done in terms of awareness creation for the causes of these diseases and how to treat them very, very early enough.
President Muhammadu Buhari has promised to increase budgetary allocation to the health sector and improve the quality and access to medical facilities across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And still in Nigeria, a set of twins joined at the chest and abdomen have been successfully separated in the capital, Abuja. The two girls are now back home, as CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
Goodness and Mercy Ede are back in hospital for their routine check. The Siamese twins were joined at the chest and abdomen. They were also diagnosed with a rare condition called omphalocele, meaning part of their intestine was sticking out of their navel. The district hospital where they were born couldn't manage their complicated condition, so they were moved here to the National Hospital.
This one, very, very unique, very complicated, and very, very delicate. They have one liver, and as God will have it, the one liver was big enough to be shared for the two of them. And that is what we did.
Conjoined twins are very rare as 1 in 50,000 births worldwide. They're either stillborn or die shortly after birth, especially in this part of the world where medical advancement is still a work in progress. It took a medical team comprising 78 personnel over 1 year to plan and execute the surgery. Such surgeries don't come cheap. They cost as much as 20 million naira or $55,000. However, it was done at little or no cost to the family.
It's like corporate social responsibility for National Hospital, but what we did it almost free.
The conjoined twins came as a shock to their mother. Caring for them wasn't easy, but their separation has brought great relief.
Those two babies being stuck together, bathing them, everything you want to do with them, you carry them together. Bathing them, carry together, feeding them, you carry it and sit on your lap together. After feeding one, you switch to one. And sometimes, if they wake up in the morning, when both of them are very hungry, feeding one another, one is seriously crying, wanting the food. From time to time, I have to turn them because it's only one-sided. They can lie. You attend to them individually now.
Now, Goodness and Mercy have a chance at life independently. Doctors have been closely monitoring their progress, and they've been doing well so far. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Norway has pledged to take 600 refugees from camps in Rwanda. The number includes those evacuated from Libya. Many African migrants who failed to cross the Mediterranean Sea have been evacuated from insecure detention centers in Libya. At Gashora camp, southeast of Kigali, close to 300 refugees await a decision to be resettled elsewhere. The first group of 7 departed to Sweden early December, and France will now take 200 refugees, including 100 evacuees. Canada has also pledged to take 800 refugees, of whom 200 are evacuees from Libya. Norway and other European Union countries are supporting programs to curb the crossing of the sea to Europe.
And we are going to continue to support this initiative, and we're also going to let some of them come to Norway because it's 640,000 migrants in Libya, and all of them want to come to Europe. but there is no chance that everybody is going to get permission to stay in Europe, because we are only getting permission to stay for those who are real refugees who cannot return back to their country of origin, because then they will be illegally prosecuted and inhumane treated.
It's good news. Why? Because if we manage to free up space in the center, then we can evacuate and save more lives. As we speak, there is intense fighting happening in Libya, and it's very urgent for us to speed up the evacuation pace. So resettlement will allow to welcome more people.
The city of Ben Guedane is a border region between Tunisia and Libya. Each day, thousands of Libyans enter Tunisia to live in the neighboring country. Many Libyan professionals have started successful businesses in Tunisia and decided not to return home because they think Libya will remain unstable for years to come.
Jamel Harari is one of the best carpenters in Ben Guedane. The Libyan national chose to live on the border between the two North African states. He deplores the instability in his home country.
Tension is still high in Libya. It needs decades to stabilize. That's why I decided to move to Tunisia with my family and to work here, where the situation is better on the economic and security level.
The 27-year-old carpenter fears for the future of his country. Jamal is very pessimistic about the outcome of the war.
It's unacceptable that the fate of Libya is in the hands of foreign countries. Some are pushing for military intervention. Libya is descending into chaos. We Libyans can resolve our problems through dialogue instead of taking arms.
Social scientists in the city of Ben Guedane have been studying the unusual phenomenon of migration of Libyans to Tunisia. They maintain that this trend has become a habit in border towns.
The war in Libya favors migration in one direction, from a country at war to a stable one. Libyans usually open businesses or invest in real estate. However, it's unusual to see Libyans in manual work. This is the result of the worsening economic and social situation in Libya.
Authorities are preparing for the flow of Libyan migrants. The Bureau of the House of People's Representatives has decided to convene a hearing with the government on the situation in Libya and possible impacts on Tunisia. In 2011, Tunisia hosted over 1.5 million Libyans. The majority returned home after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi and the end of the war. Now the unrest in the North African state is once again forcing thousands of Libyan families out of their country. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, Adnan Chauchi is staying with us in Tunis, where he tells us the country's President Kais Saied has appointed Olies Fafa to form the next government as soon as possible. The appointment comes after a series of written consultations conducted by the President of the Republic with parties, parliamentary blocs and national organizations.
Article 89 of the Tunisian Constitution gives the President of the Republic the right to choose the person he deems best suited to form a government.
Out of respect, the government to be formed will not be the one of the President of the Republic, but the one that will be obtained by the confidence of the Parliament.
Farfer shed light on his vision concerning the priorities of the state, as well as his perceptions regarding the action plan of the next government.
I will do my best to form a homogeneous government that will meet the expectations of the people and avoid political clashes while focusing on the economic and social priorities.
Elias Farfer will form a cabinet within 1 month. The Prime Minister-designate will have to present the lineup of the government before Parliament in order to gain confidence.
The cabinet needs the absolute majority of 109 votes. If the government fails, then the House of People's Representatives will be dissolved by the President, who will call for early legislative elections.
The Prime Minister-designate ran for President in 2019 as the candidate of the Democratic Forum for Labour and Liberties. Elias Farfer served as Minister of Tourism after the elections of the National Constituent Assembly in 2011. He was appointed Minister of Finance in 2012. The 48-year-old politician is a mechanical and management engineer and a former head of manufacturing companies in Tunisia and Europe. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's now go to Penina Karibe for the latest business news. Penina.
Thank you, Beatrice. Coming up on Africa Live Business tonight.
South African Airways cancels flights as cash crisis deepens. And Angola now vows to use all means to bring Isabel dos Santos to justice over the loss of $1 billion.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
AfricaLive. Find your voice.
A funding squeeze has forced South African Airways to cancel several domestic and international flights. The national carrier says 8 flights between Johannesburg and Cape Town will be cut this week and 20 others between Johannesburg and Durban. South African Airways has also cancelled at least 10 flights between Johannesburg and Munich. Passengers booked on these flights will be accommodated on the airline services between Johannesburg and Frankfurt as well as London. But those travelling via Munich will complete their journey on partner airlines. Last year, SAA was placed into bankruptcy protection. It is now waiting for the government to fulfill a $138 million lifeline that will keep it afloat. Ghana has charged former executives of 2 insolvent banks for crimes that contributed to the country's banking crisis. Former Beige Bank CEO and UT Bank founder are facing charges that the West African economy says cost the country roughly $2.2 billion in bailouts. The fraud trials come as Ghana concludes reforms in its banking industry, which started in 2017. The UT Bank founder is facing charges for money laundering and theft worth some $9.07 million and $8.6 million respectively. On the other hand, the former Beige Bank CEO faces similar charges that amount to $60.3 million. Both executives appeared before the Accra Circuit Court. They have denied the charges against them. In the meantime, the Angolan government has vowed to use all possible means to force the return of Isabel dos Santos. The move follows thousands of leaked documents that reveal how the former Angolan president's daughter made her $2.2 billion fortune. At least 715,000 emails, contracts, accounts and audits of her business operations have been leaked in the investigation called Rwanda Leaks. According to the expose, Africa's richest woman had access to lucrative deals, including land, diamonds, oil and telecom during her father's reign. The documents also suggest that an offshore network of 400 companies were connected to Dos Santos, her husband and their associates. Both Dos Santos and her husband have denied the accusations. African heads of state are attending a major sub-Saharan Africa investment conference hosted by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson in London. This is the first time governments and businesses from the UK and Africa have come together for an event of this scale. CGTN's Andrew Wilson was there.
More than 20 African heads of state, not a bad turnout considering 3 years of Brexit policy chaos. But there were 50 at a recent China-Africa summit. The Prime Minister knows the UK has to press the reset button on Africa and concentrate on its commercial potential rather than its colonial past.
Africa is the future, and the UK has a huge and active role to play in that future. And I hope you agree. Because we are and we will be a partner, your partner, through thick and thin.
This is not about trade, but rather investment, matching the UK's financial centres with a new market that in some cases is starting to show real signs of growth. The UK is clearly behind the curve on this. China, India, Brazil, Turkey all regard Africa as a commercial opportunity. Even France. President Macron has made 16 African visits in the last 2 years. But this summit is a clear sign that post-Brexit, London once back in the game. There's some ground to cover. Former Prime Minister Theresa May's 3-nation visit in 2018 was the first Downing Street trip to Africa for 5 years and the first to Kenya in 3 decades. Also at the conference, Prince Harry, soon to withdraw from royal duties. His genuine affection for the continent, a positive example for the UK delegation.
We in the UK have a vital job in continuing to convince people across the continent that we're not just a great friend and ally, a reliable ally, but also the people you should be doing business with.
By 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet will be African. Britain can't compete with the largesse of the major economies, but its ties to the continent run deep, and it's through that history that it wants to build a different future. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, London.
The decision by French-speaking countries in West Africa to rename the CFA franc as ECO has been rejected by English-speaking countries in the sub-region. The 6 states, led by Nigeria, say the move to rename the single currency was unilateral and unacceptable. CGTN's Laura Walubengo explains.
Last December, 8 francophone West African countries led by the President of Côte d'Ivoire announced the retirement of French colonial currency, the CFA franc. However, just barely weeks later, a speedy launch of the region's new currency, ECO, is stoking division. The Anglophone nations, which include Nigeria, Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone, along with Guinea, have described the move to rename the French-backed currency as unilateral. The countries argue ECOWAS was not involved.
It must be said that the future of the ECO currency is uncertain to an extent that the announcement that has been made is unilateral. It has fundamental principles that have not been respected, since what we have been told is a currency that should be sub-regional, that is to say, belong to the ECOWAS region. However, the announcement that has been made says that ECO currency will only belong to the UEMOA area. We are really in total uncertainty and we need clarification. That action is truly one-sided.
The agreement to rename the CFA franc as the ECO scraps obligations for the West African Economic and Monetary Union members to park 50% of their foreign reserves with the French Treasury. It also strips French representatives from any decision-making and management capacity relating to the Union. However, since the CFA franc is pegged at a fixed exchange rate to the euro, the new agreement maintains this arrangement for the ECO, a move Anglophone nations are against.
These decisions to withdraw are based on the concerns of these 6 countries, and the same concerns were shared by all the experts who gave their opinion on the question of the lack of clarity in the pegging of the ECO to the euro, but also on all the conditions related to the exchange of currency. There is also the question of the management of reserves and currencies. If you notice, the countries reluctant to the ECO are countries which operate with their own currencies, which have their own monetary logic, which are in a certain comfort and which will not want to abandon this economic comfort.
Set up in 1975, ECOWAS has a combined population of 385 million. The latest single currency ECO comes as Africa prepares for the first time to trade together through its free trade agreement. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
This year's annual meeting of the World Economic Forum has opened in Davos, Switzerland. The 4-day event brings nearly 3,000 participants together to discuss how to build a more cohesive and sustainable world. Earlier, CGTN's Tian Wei caught up with the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab.
You've been traveling to China, Professor Schwab, frequently. Once or twice or even 3 times every year. You got a medal, a national honor medal coming from the Chinese president. What do you make of this country, China, which many have been observing for decades, but still there seems to be very mixed, shall I say, analysis?
Yes, maybe as a European, I see Europe working together, sometimes with difficulties, despite the diversity which we have. And I think we have to recognize that China has a long, very proud cultural traditions dating back many centuries. China is the largest country in terms of population and soon the strongest country in terms of economy. So We have to treat China with respect, sometimes with admiration, and we have to make sure that China takes a very responsible and responsive role in global affairs.
One of the things of the backdrop for this year's World Economic Forum has a lot to do with the Phase 1 deal signed between China and the United States. How do you see events like this will be making it possible for the international community to come to consensus?
It's a very important step forward, and I'm very happy that this deal was signed just before the annual meeting opens, because it provides new confidence into the future of the economy. But we still have an important step to go. And I hope that the strong presence of business leaders here, of political leaders, will help to move forward, not only related to the trade deal, but also related to many other issues which we have to face in the world of today.
Elsewhere, Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou is in court for her much-publicized extradition hearing. Meng has spent 13 months under house arrest for alleged violations of U.S. sanctions on Iran. The proceedings are underway in a case being closely watched in Beijing, Ottawa and Washington. From Vancouver, here's CGTN's Dan Williams.
This is a pivotal part of the hearing. That's what one legal expert told me in the build-up to Meng Wanzhou's extradition hearing. There is a significant media presence here at the court for the proceedings. This week the focus will be on so-called double criminality. That means the crime of which she is accused also needs to be a crime in Canada. It is at the core of Canada's Extradition Act. The alleged conduct would need to be punishable by jail time in Canada. For Meng to be extradited, the Crown must prove double criminality. The US Department of Justice has charged Meng with bank fraud and wire fraud, among other charges, in violation of US sanctions on Iran. But Meng's lawyers say her conduct would not be prosecutable if it had occurred in Canada, as Canada did not have the same economic sanctions against Iran at the time of Meng's extradition warrant. But Canada's Crown lawyers say the alleged offence is fraud, which is a crime in both the US and Canada. More than a year has passed since Canadian authorities arrested Meng at Vancouver Airport on a request from the United States. Meng has been living under house arrest after she was released on $7.5 million bail. If the test on dual criminality is not met, then Meng could be released, although such a decision could be appealed. But if the Crown wins, the next phase of the hearing is scheduled for June. That part will focus on due process surrounding Meng's arrest. It promises to be a tense week ahead. Dan Williams, CGTN, Vancouver.
We'll leave it there for now. Back ahead on global business, renaming the French-backed CFA franc currency to the ECO stirs trouble in West Africa. We'll be live in Lagos to understand that controversy much better. That's at the top of the hour. I shall see you then. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice. Penina, thank you. And we still have more news coming up for you on the program. Here's what's ahead. We'll explore the hidden meaning behind the colorful houses of Matopo's Hills in Zimbabwe. Stay with us.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
AfricaLive. Find your voice.
Now, deep in the valleys of the picturesque Matopo's Hills in the southwest of Zimbabwe is a community that's keeping an age-old practice alive. Brightly painted houses are a common sight in the region, but they're not just colorful, they're also carrying a deeper meaning. Take a look.
The views are breathtaking. But this rugged terrain has delayed the delivery of telecommunications and electricity here. It may be cut off from all those modern conveniences, but this area remains deeply rooted and connected to its history, culture, and heritage. Mud hut walls are the canvas for ornate paintings. Local women produce these each year using different color soils and charcoal.
We paint after the harvest when we have spare time and do not have to go into the fields. It's a way meant to beautify our homes.
Beyond aesthetics, the decorations which are carried through inside the houses are evocative of the history of the Ndebele people who settled here after migrating from Masvingo, home of the great Zimbabwe ruins. The prominently featured circle carries a significant meaning.
When you look at the stars, including the sun, the moon, all of them are secular and they are in constant motion. And if you look at those parts that they follow, their orbits, they are secular or elliptical. So everything about the universe seems to be built around the circle. Right, so that circle, and you look at Africa in terms of their architecture, their cattle crawls, everything about them is secular.
It symbolizes the balance between man and nature, a relationship being put to the test by modernization that is manifesting itself here through the replacement of clay and thatch with brick and mortar. Traditionalists want to see the practice adapted.
So you can modernize without having to use clay, without having to use grass. Use current material. If you are using fiberglass, if you are using glass, you can use it and produce these things.
The rain has washed away some of the artwork, but a fresh coat of paint in a few months will renew its splendor, helping to keep a tradition that's been passed down for generations alive.
My mother taught me how to paint. I have also taught my daughters how to do so that they can continue with this tradition long after I am gone.
Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Matobo District, Zimbabwe.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Tanzania and Uganda play a test series to promote the sport of cricket in East Africa.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
And we begin with cricket, where this sport continues to grow in popularity among young women and girls across East Africa. Despite several barriers, countries like Tanzania are making headway, as CGTN's Leon Sinyange reports.
Uganda and Tanzania's junior women's cricket sides faced off in a bilateral series. Regional bragging rights were at stake. For these young cricketers, it is a worthwhile experience.
We just play in our condition of games, but you know, the games, it has been maybe you win or maybe you lose.
Despite a 10 wickets win for Uganda, Tanzania maintained the series lead, both sides averaging 40 runs per inning. Despite the low scores, the coaches here feel there is an improvement, and they think with more time on the oval, these young cricketers will get better. With national schools cricket tournaments running every year, the path to further growth of women's cricket in Uganda is visible.
The association is supporting a lot of development cricket to the extent that we have more under-19 girls as compared to the senior girls. Well, that means we have a brighter future with ladies cricket.
Tanzania is keen to adopt similar initiatives. The Tanzania Cricket Board plans to spread the game within the country.
As a new board, we promised to have better grounds, to have more regions playing cricket in Tanzania, and at some part we have managed to do that. Currently we are renovating the grounds in Tanzania cricket, which are falls in Dar es Salaam, and we have increased 2 regions.
2020 will be a busy year as both sides compete for a slot at next year's Under-19 Women's Cricket World Cup. Getting there will take more than putting bat to ball. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
In football, the Aston Villa have completed a $10 million deal for Tanzanian striker Mbwana Samatta. The 27-year-old has signed a 4.5-year deal, subject to a work permit and international clearance being granted. He scored 10 goals for Belgium's side Genk in all competitions this season, including a goal at Anfield against Liverpool in the Champions League. Samatta will be the first Tanzanian to play in the Premier League. He will not, however, be available for Villa's home match against Watford on Tuesday. Villa have played their last 3 games without a recognized striker after losing Brazilian forward Wesley for the rest of the season due to a knee injury sustained at Burnley on New Year's Day. And remaining with January's new signings, Erling Haaland enjoyed a debut to remember as he scored a 20-minute hat-trick after coming off the bench in a 5-3 win for Borussia Dortmund at Augsburg. Haaland was named among the